Bob, what do we know about these charges?
Yeah, well, Mike Jeffries and his partner were arrested today in Florida. A third man, alleged to have been an accomplice, was arrested in Wisconsin. And what the indictment suggests or alleges is that these three men, over a number of years, operated a extensive sex trafficking and prostitution ring. And what the prosecutors say is that the men recruited and enticed young men to come to sex parties. And while they were there, they plied them with Viagra, with alcohol, and they essentially coerced them into taking part in sexual activities for the pleasure, for the gratification of Mike Jeffries and his partner. And they say that many of these young men came because it was suggested to them that by participating in these events, they could perhaps secure some kind of work, some kind of career in the modeling business connected to Abercrombie and Fitch, or that if they didn't participate, it could harm their career. The charges were laid out by the New York District Attorney. Let's hear from him.
Aspiring fashion models knew that a place on one of Abercrombie's iconic ads could be the ticket to success in the modeling industry.
This is awful.
But while Jeffries was the CEO of one of the most recognizable clothing retailers in the world, he was using his power, his wealth, and his influence to traffic men for his own sexual pleasure and that of his romantic partner, Matthew Smith.
Now, more than a dozen men referred to simply as John Does are named in this indictment. But what prosecutors are saying is they think that there could have been many more people involved in this alleged sex trafficking ring. This investigation, it appears, was started after a BBC investigation into allegations where they spoke to a number of men who said they had been sexually exploited by Mike
Thanks
Jeffries
for tuning in.
his partner. Now, Mike Jeffries due to appear in court in Florida. The other man, the alleged accomplice, the alleged recruiter, was arrested in Wisconsin, will appear, we understand, in a court in Minnesota. And then the three men would be transferred to New York, and prosecutors saying one of those men, Mike Jeffries' partner, Matthew Smith, they might ask for that he not be let out on bail because he also holds UK citizenship, so could be considered a flight risk. But prosecutors certainly suggesting that they expect that more charges could follow and inviting any more men who believe they were victims of this trio to come forward.
Okay, so we have two individuals charged with sex trafficking. First, we had P. Diddy. Now we have Abercrombie and Fitch CEO Jeffries.
Former Abercrombie and Fitch CEO Mike Jeffries. Prosecutors are charging him with sex trafficking charges, accusing him of sexually exploiting and abusing young men, suggesting that they would be hired as models. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York is holding a press conference on that right now. Let's listen in for just moments ago.
Good afternoon. I'm Breon Peace, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. Thank you all for joining us today. With me today are James Dennehy, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's New York Field Office. We have Deputy Chief Carlos Ortiz, Commanding Officer of the NYPD Special Victims Unit. And we have my office's outstanding prosecution team, Aaron Reed, Megan Farrell, and Philip Pilmar. We're here today to announce the arrest and charging of three defendants. Former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, Michael Jeffries, Matthew Smith, and James Jacobson, on charges of sex trafficking and engaging in interstate prostitution. Powerful individuals for too long have trafficked and abuse for their own sexual pleasure young people with few resources and a dream of securing a successful career in fashion or entertainment. To anyone who thinks they can exploit and coerce others by using the so-called casting couch system, this case should serve as a warning. Prepare to trade that couch for a bed in federal prison.
Absolutely.
The message from today's prosecution is clear. Sexually exploiting vulnerable human beings is a crime, and doing so by dangling dreams of a future in fashion or modeling or any other business is no different. My office and our law enforcement partners will always prioritize standing up for victims, no matter their gender, and no matter how powerful the wrongdoers think they are. We will hold them to account. As we allege in the indictment, between 1992 and 2014, Michael Jeffries was the chief executive officer of Abercrombie and Fitch. Abercrombie was a widely known clothing retailer with stores around the world. Aspiring fashion models knew that a place on one of Abercrombie's iconic ads could be the ticket to success in the modeling industry. But while Jeffries was the CEO of one of the most recognizable clothing retailers in the world, he was using his power, his wealth, and his influence to traffic men for his own sexual pleasure and that of his romantic partner, Matthew Smith. The charging documents describe in graphic and disturbing detail the violent and exploitive acts these defendants perpetrated, for which they will now face justice in a court here in the Eastern District of New York. So here's what's alleged in the indictment. Jeffries and Smith employed James Jacobson to act as a recruiter to find men. Jacobson engaged in, quote, tryouts with men across the world where he would typically pay them to engage in sex acts with him. Following the tryouts with Jacobson, Smith would often then personally approve whether the men who were selected would meet Jeffries and Smith. The defendants would fly the selected men to Jeffries and Smith's homes in the Hamptons in New York City.
Sound like P. Diddy to me.
The world, in such places as England, France, Italy, Morocco, and St. Bart's, for the purpose of attending events to engage in commercial sex. But beyond simply hiring men for sex, Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson used force, fraud, and coercion to traffic those men for their own sexual gratification. For example, as alleged, the defendants employed a referral system and an interview process that did not inform the men of the details of the sex events before they attended, including the full extent and nature of the sexual activity that would be required of the men at these events. They caused the men to believe that attending these sex events could yield modeling opportunities with Abercrombie or otherwise benefit their careers. Smith and Jeffries employed a secret staff to operate these sex events. The staff ensured that the men signed non-disclosure agreements and handed over their personal items, such as their phones, before the start of the events to maintain the secrecy of these events. The defendants caused the men to believe that not complying with requests for certain acts, sex acts, during the events could harm their careers. The defendants pressured the men to consume alcohol, Viagra, and muscle relaxants known as poppers during the sex events. And they required the presence of staff during the sexual activity and ensured that the men did not leave the sex events until Jeffries and Smith decided that the sessions were over. Also, as alleged, on more than one occasion, Jeffries and Smith either directed others to inject or personally injected men with an erection-inducing substance for the purpose of causing the men to engage in sex acts the men were incapable of engaging in or unwilling to engage in. Additionally, the indictment alleges on more than one occasion when men did not or could not consent, Jeffries and Smith violated the bodily integrity of these men by subjecting them or continuing to subject them to invasive sexual and violent contact by body parts and other objects. As alleged in the indictment, Jeffries, Smith, and Jacobson didn't just carry this activity on for a couple of occasions. Their sex trafficking and prostitution enterprise lasted at least from the end of 2008 until early 2015. During that period, the defendants hired dozens of men and transported them to New York and around the globe.
Thanks for
They
tuning
spent
in.
millions of dollars on a massive infrastructure to support this operation and maintain its secrecy. This included hundreds, thousands of dollars of cash for commercial sex, prolific amounts of money for staff to run the sex events, money for domestic travel, international travel, hotel rooms, services from a security company, and Jacobson's salary, among other things. Now, this investigation remains ongoing. Although there are 15 John Does identified as victims in this indictment, this interstate prostitution venture encompassed dozens and dozens of men. And I encourage anyone with information about this case, including anyone who was a victim of the defendant's alleged crimes, to contact the FBI. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Now, I want to thank the victims who have already come forward for sharing their stories. Prosecutions like this are really impossible without the bravery of victims who are willing to report what happened to them to law enforcement. With this office, the Department of Justice, and its law enforcement partners will continue to work tirelessly to protect victims from powerful individuals who use their wealth and their influence to exploit and harm others for sexual gratification. In addition to my team, I'd like to give special thanks to FBI Special Agent Amanda Young and NYPD Detectives Paul Byrne and Antonio Pagan, who have worked hard on this investigation in the pursuit of justice. I'll now turn it over to FBI Assistant Director in Charge.
And you are watching a live news conference out of New York. This moments ago, those comments were made. Former Abercrombie and Fitch CEO Mike Jeffries is under arrest. He's accused of sexually abusing and exploiting young men. And along with Jeffries, his partner Matt Smith, and a third gentleman named Jim Jacobson, also arrested in that FBI investigation. Jeffries will face a judge later today in Florida, and that's where CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides joins us live from West Palm Beach. Christian, what are we learning about Jeffries' arrest? I mean, the allegations are pretty disturbing.
Such troubling allegations here. Now, we do know that Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, will face a judge at some point later today. It's scheduled for 2 p.m. We heard just now from prosecutors sort of laying out their case, saying that this was essentially a casting couch operation and that they would dangle dreams of a modeling career to dozens and dozens of young men. Now, officials, the prosecutors say that they've got 15 alleged victims that have come forward with these allegations. And so we've got 3 individuals that are involved here. The defendants, according to prosecutors, employed a referral system. So there was an interview process that did not inform the young men of what was essentially going to happen. So they would show up thinking that they were there for a casting interview, and then were told, allegedly, to sign non-disclosure agreements, were given alcohol, were given Viagra, according to
That's
federal
awful.
prosecutors, to engage in these sexual acts
Mm-hmm.
with the promises of some sort of modeling career. Just to go
Same
over
thing
the
with
three
Sean
defendants, we've got
Combs.
Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie
Puffy.
and Fitch. We've got his partner, Matthew Smith,
Mm-hmm.
who was also arrested. And then a third gentleman also, Mr. Jacobson, Mr. James Jacobson. And all three are facing charges related to these 15 alleged victims that have come forward.
And Christian, we just saw the press conference, and that
Mm-hmm.
was in New York, but the case is actually going to be in Florida. Why that?
Well, we know that Mike Jeffries is going to face a judge here, and it's because he was arrested here. My understanding is that eventually the Eastern District of New York will handle the case, but certainly they had to cooperate with authorities here. The FBI field office here in Miami confirming that they did hold operations in the West Palm Beach area. So Mike Jeffries was arrested here. We know that his partner, Mr. Smith, is a resident of West Palm Beach. Jacobson was arrested in Wisconsin, and so he is set to face a judge later today. Eventually, my understanding is that they will all be arraigned in New York at some point, but that today they're going to face a judge, essentially be read the charges that they're facing, and then they will be transported. But of course, it's very early in the investigation, so everything is in flux and could be different. But just such troubling allegations. Our partners at the BBC have done a job of going over, they've spoken to some of the alleged victims, and they've told some difficult stories about what was happening, their expectations. Again, officials calling this a casting couch operation.
My.
That back when these allegations initially surfaced, Mr. Jeffries, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Jacobson all said that they denied the allegations. And Abercrombie and Fitch also said they were unaware of any of these incidents. They said that they would conduct a probe into the allegations and whether or not they happened while he was at the company. According to what federal officials are saying, they're saying that the probe extends from 1992 to 2014.
Wow.
15 victims so far have come forward in this. CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides from Florida for us. Thanks so much, Christian.
Thanks for watching.